fertile soil, and the vicious cycle is generated in the soil. If the peasants, again, do not acquire these products, they will not be able to continue producing, and even those seeds that are generated from these products are tomatoes or corn, etc., for a second production, they will not be useful.
The production of GM foods puts farmers and consumers in front of an enormous challenge. The global area dedicated to GM crops increased by 3.3% in 2022 compared to the previous year, reaching 202.2 million hectares, a new record, with the largest area planted with this technology, according to the latest annual report of AG Bioinvestor GM Monitor. The largest changes in acreage, excluding countries cultivating less than 100,000 hectares, were seen in Australia, Vietnam, Honduras, and Uruguay, driven by a combination of larger planted areas overall and higher adoption rates.
The first thing we must understand is that internationally these genetically modified foods have greater preponderance, and especially in the nations that are subject to the policies of the North American Empire. What this means is that these countries give greater commercialization and greater, in one way or another, advantages to these foods compared to foods that are grown under organic methods. Under agroecological methods, this seems a contradiction. There are nations in which these foods are sold in great quantity, in greater preponderance, and that means that this is generating an unequal economy for the small producers who cannot compete, since these transnationals are the ones that in some another way finance these foods. These transnationals have control of food production worldwide.
The transnationals Bayer Monsanto of Germany, Corteva Agriscience of the United States, and Syngenta of China give these three countries dominance of 65% of the seed market in the world, and consequently, control of what is consumed in the world.
Since we know how this system works, let's now review some data on hundreds of transgenic foods developed in laboratories of private companies or public research organizations that can be of animals, vegetables, or fermented origin.
Fun facts: GM foods. Spanish scientists managed to create plants resistant to the attack of viruses, bacteria, fungi, or insects, inhibiting a single gene. Transgenic foods have also been designed from animals such as carp and salmon that grow faster. Looking to the future, one of the objectives in this field is to create milk-producing animals that allow to obtain milk fortified with certain medicines or low in lactose. Genetic engineering techniques have also been applied to fermented transgenic foods. This is the case of yeast and bacteria that have been modified to shorten the maturation time needed by cheeses or wines, in which the fruity character of their smell is intensified.
We continue in Guide Your Body. Through the educational strategy, university in the countryside, Nicaragua advances in the attention to young people with disabilities in higher education. From Managua, Kenya presents the case of the two young people for whom there are no barriers to professionalization.
The municipality of Santo Domingo is located 190 kilometers from the capital, in the department of Chontales, in the center of the country. We traveled to this area to learn the story of two young people who are an example of overcoming. They are students of university modality in the field. The first to receive us, along with his mother, was Jackson Ismael Pichardo, 28, a young man who lost his sight at age 16. Due to a blow to the head, he lost his sight. In the same area, we also visited Emiliano Zamora Flores, 22, who suffered neonatal meningitis.
This caused me a physical motor disability that I have today.
The physical condition has not been an impediment for them and continue the studies. Both travel every weekend to the National University of Engineering in the departmental capital, where they study the higher technical career in agro-industrial technology.
We study online sometimes, without sleep, 1 or 2 nights, in the early morning, at dawn, to leave the next day. I record with my recorder of my phone. And thank God to our commander, a great man that God has put in this beautiful nation of Nicaragua, and to the comrade Vice President Rosario Murillo, to her that we can, people with disabilities, to open these doors that did not exist before, or in dreams, and now thanks to God and to them it is a reality. Thank God it is one of the opportunities that came to me. I tried to study, and thank God, here we are enjoying it to the fullest with my partner Jackson. And as I have always said, I do not plan to go back until I have that title.
Jackson and Emiliana have become inseparable friends. They assure that once they finish the technical studies, they have future plans to put into practice what they have learned.
I usually call him brother, bro, or even comrade, always with a sense of respect. He is my guide. Talking to him how it serves me and it serves as a vision to him. Our purpose is to graduate, to have the title of professionals, and then with our effort and with everything we have learned, that is something, a very valuable treasure, because it has been an enterprise such as learning to undertake and progress, for example in the creation of dairy products, or the creation of pickles and also wines. With this degree we will have knowledge of giving different added value to raw materials.
Like these young people, there are other students in similar conditions who prepare at university in the countryside. A successful inclusive education strategy promoted by the Nicaraguan government throughout the country.
They receive food and also transportation. It is really a successful policy of our good government because they are bringing the university closer to where it is needed, in this case the countryside.
According to the National Council of Universities, more than 10,600 students are served in the modality of university in the countryside in Nicaragua with an offer of more than 90 free careers available to Nicaraguan youth. Reported by Kenia Doña, correspondent TeleSUR Nicaragua.
Stay tuned for the premiere of the new special interview this week. This is how we end this broadcast and invite you to interact with us through social networks. On Instagram, you can find us as always in @GuiaTuCuerpoTLSur, on Twitter @GuiaTuCuerpoTLS, and on my account in that network @GFloresTLSur. We also received your message through the email guiatucuerpo@telesur.net. Remember on you to find our previous broadcast. I'm Jenny Flores. Thank you for joining us and allowing to influence for your quality of life. See you next week.
El mundo se mueve constantemente y todos los días se generan nuevos sucesos. Se mueve la geopolítica mundial. Nos preguntamos qué hay detrás de cada acontecimiento, cuáles son las consecuencias y cómo nos afectan. Ante estas preguntas, buscaremos poner el punto en la I.
TeleSUR is the voice that speaks up in defense of the people of Latin America and the world. For me, it is a media that offers different perspectives. It invites us to reflect and question the hegemonic narratives. From the fight against poverty and social exclusion to the defense of human rights and social justice.
TeleSUR is more than just a television channel. It's a platform that celebrates our people's diversity.
It inspires us to be more informed, more aware, and committed to the construction of a better world. Hello, welcome to From the South.
El mundo se mueve constantemente y todos los días se generan nuevos sucesos. Se mueve la geopolítica mundial. Nos preguntamos qué hay detrás de cada acontecimiento, cuáles son las consecuencias y cómo nos afectan. Ante estas preguntas, buscaremos poner el punto en la I.
We are here in front of the life, willing to create the way with the ideas in the destination. We are the echo of the forgotten, the fight of those who do not give up. We believe in the transcendence of stories and in the firmness of their walk, without lowering your hands and with your head held high, with the heart and the commitment in the skin, to show a fairer truth, where equality is real and not a piece of paper. TeleSUR always gives you more. Hello, be welcome. In this space, TeleSUR English presents a production of the China Academy titled China Now, a news talk series that showcases the reality of the Asian giant, as well as the mixture of tradition and modernity in its culture, technology, and politics. In the segment China Currents, Chris Yan talks about the career and values of the new Foreign Minister Wang Yi, the economic guidelines of the Communist Party of China, and China's national security policies. In this session, Threshold, Liza Pan tells us about a new study regarding findings on how nicotine impacts health, a new gas exploration project in Sichuan province, and how drones can help fight the flames. In the segment Thinkers Forum, the professor Wen Yan, a researcher with the China Institute, offers a historical review on how China emerged as an empire and how it survived for centuries, outgrowing other civilizations. After these advances, join us and enjoy the first episode.
China Currents is a weekly news talk show from China to the world. We cover viral news about China every week and also give you the newest updates on China's cutting-edge technologies. Let's get started. Hi, welcome to China Currents. I'm Chris. On July 25th, China's top legislature voted to appoint Wang Yi as the new foreign minister. Meanwhile, Qin Gang, who previously served as China's ambassador to the United States from 2021 to 2023, will step down from his post as foreign minister. Wang Yi, 69, was China's foreign minister for almost a decade, from 2013 to 2022. He has been an influential figure in shaping China's foreign policy and has played an important role in strengthening China's diplomatic ties around the world. In June, Wang Yi met with his US counterpart Antony Blinken while the latter was in China, and they recently met a Jakarta meeting to promote dialogue between the two countries and work to stabilize China-US relations. Before the reappointment, Wang Yi served as CPC's senior member for foreign affairs, the top diplomat in Chinese politics. Although this announcement has fueled rumors why Qin was removed, the reshuffle of key positions in the Chinese government's diplomatic body reflects its ongoing effort to maintain a dynamic and proactive international engagement. As China navigates a complex and evolving global landscape, this appointment reaffirms China's commitment to multilateralism, cooperation, and peaceful resolution of conflicts. The first country Wang Yi visited as he reassumed his post in the foreign ministry was Turkey. A day after reappointment on July 26th, Wang Yi met with Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan in Ankara. During the talk, Erdogan welcomed China's enterprises to expand their investments in Turkey and expressed Turkey's willingness to maintain communication and coordination with China on international and regional issues, such as Ukraine. He also stated that Turkey does not support NATO's increased activities in the Asia-Pacific region. Wang Yi's visit marks the highest-level visit from a Chinese official to Turkey since 2021. And besides Turkey, Wang recently attended the BRICS National Security Advisors meeting in Johannesburg, where he remarked the BRICS mechanism is vital for dialogue and cooperation among major developing countries. Next up, on July 24th, Chinese Politburo held a meeting to analyze the current economic situation, focusing on the domestic real estate market. For the first time, Politburo underlined a new situation where significant changes have occurred in the supply-demand relationship over the real estate market. As an indicator, the conference called for timely adjustment and optimization of real estate policies. According to the Minister of Housing and Construction, the new policies lift the restrictions for people aiming to buy a second housing and lower the down payment ratios. Mortgages no longer check whether a person have taken out loans before, aiming to make buying property easier. Despite a steady recovery in China's Q2 GDP growth, residential property prices have been dwindling for months, matched with the change in supply-demand relationship. Recently, Guangzhou Evergrande, which used to be China's top real estate developer, is reported to have a loss of 100 billion euro. The company is on the brink of bankruptcy, and there's no sign indicating that it's too big to fall. On the internet, netizens hold a very mixed feeling. Some people welcome the Politburo's promise of strengthening affordable housing and promoting the renovation of urban properties. The netizens interpret the promise as a measure to rebuild the confidence of consumers. Further investment might not be ideal for an overheated market, while the idle properties can fulfill the demand of citizens and save real estate enterprises from a market cool down. As the Politburo stressed out, housing is for living, not for speculation, and major changes happening in real estate, which was one of the main engines that pushed China's economic growth in the past decade. However, there are also netizens who hold pessimistic views. Some netizens argue, although the policy removes some barriers to apply for mortgage, we still have little money to spare. Some finance advisors argue that despite the goodwill of the policy, people's confidence towards future economy is somewhat low and hurts their willingness to take out mortgage, which is fundamental to the real estate market. Next up, let's keep tracking China's lunar project. On July 22nd, China successfully carried out a trial test on the main engine of the Long March 10, a new carrier rocket designed for moon landing missions. The test assessed all the requirements for the engine and provided strong support for the solidification for its technical state, the establishment of the technical baseline of the product, and improving reliability. China has just announced its plan to land astronauts on the moon by the year 2030. Instead of building one giant rocket that carries all, China plans to launch a pair of rockets, each carrying half the equipment and supplies that the project needs. The success of the main engine marks a significant step in completing China's ambitious lunar project. On China's social media platform, netizens are excited about the progress. Can't wait to see a Chinese man walking the moon, they commented. Next up, we have two pieces of news about national security. On July 20th, during a security conference in Colorado, William Burns, director of the Central Intelligence Agency, claimed that the United States has made progress in rebuilding its intelligence network in China after having lost most of its agents a decade ago. Burns also stated that the United States has strong human intelligence capability in its spy operations. In response to Burns' comment, on July 24th, a spokesperson from the Chinese Foreign Ministry vowed to take all necessary measures to resolutely safeguard national security in a press briefing. Information warfare has been a controversial topic among Chinese netizens. The supporters believe that the West is infiltrating China's online discussions to stir up resentment, and the opposition claimed that such warfare is merely another witch hunt that violates China's free speech. Now, as Burns admits the espionage activities of the US and a strong human intelligence capability it possesses, the long-divided public opinion shifted towards Chinese government. Online discussions show unconditional support for the response by China's foreign ministry, condemning the US's open provocation. Interestingly, Burns was reported to have come to China on a secret mission in May. The reason for that visit, according to him, should be reducing tension and keeping communication between both sides. While considering his comment on the rebuilding of spy network in China, come on, Bill, we all know what's brought you here. Speaking of spying activities, China is one of the most attacked countries in cyber attack. On July 25th, the Wuhan Earthquake Monitoring Center, a key institution responsible for monitoring seismic activity in the region, suffered a cyber attack initiated by overseas organizations. The compromised equipment was immediately sealed off, and an investigation was launched by the public security authorities. According to a statement released by the Wuhan Public Security Bureau on July 26th, a Trojan horse program that aims to control and steal seismic intensity data has been discovered. This is a very sensitive data that shows the intensity and magnitude of the earthquake. According to experts, the data is taken into account when building certain military defense facilities. Therefore, the cyber attack is considered a serious threat to national security. Although the exact identity and motive of these groups remain unknown at this time, it's strongly suspected that this attack came from the United States, following their previous cyber attack on the Northwestern Polytechnical University in Xi'an, Shanxi Province in June 2022. The attack on China's vital infrastructure highlights the growing importance of cyber warfare in the ongoing geopolitical tension between China and the United States. Next up, let's take a look at the industries in China. On July 22nd, state media CCTV reported that China has just achieved a mass production of domestically made magnetic resonance imaging instrument, breaking through a long-standing foreign technical blockade. MRI technology plays a crucial role in diagnosing various major illnesses such as cardiovascular, neurological, and tumor-related conditions. However, the production technology for MRI equipment has been subject to foreign restrictions for a long time. After a prolonged period of independent research and strenuous efforts, China has achieved a major milestone with the successful development of domestically produced MRI equipment. The achievement showcases China's capability to innovate in the medical technology sector. Experts, scholars, and medical institutions have expressed high praise and curiosity regarding China's independent research and development of MRI equipment. They believe that these achievements signifies a significant leap in China's technological innovation in the medical field and contributes positively to the advancement of global medical science and technology. China is a newcomer in MRI equipment, but in the field of electric vehicles, Chinese companies have already taken the lead. On July 26, Volkswagen Group, the German auto group that owns Volkswagen, Audi, Porsche, and Lamborghini, announced a long-term technical cooperation agreement with Chinese EV maker XPeng to jointly develop two B-class battery electric vehicles for the Chinese market, which are expected to be launched in 2026. Volkswagen will invest $700 million in XPeng to acquire 4.99% stake and secure an observer seat on XPeng's board of directors. On the same day, Volkswagen subsidiary Audi also signed a strategic memorandum of understanding with SAIC Group, China's largest automaker, to develop intelligent connected vehicles. Recently, Audi admitted it's been left behind in the race of electric vehicles. Many Chinese netizens believe the cooperation will promote technological complementarity between the Chinese and German automotive industry. If everything goes according to plan, the cooperation should give German auto giant a chance to catch up in the heated race of electric vehicles. Next up, social media giant TikTok is set to launch an e-commerce program in August, aiming to help Chinese merchants to sell products to American consumers. According to a report from the Wall Street Journal, TikTok is building an Amazon-like online shopping center, which integrates different channels where users can view and purchase goods in a single page. It will provide a suite of services ranging from storage to shipping to merchants in China, stepping up its rivalries such as Shein and Temu. Some influencers in China had apparently predicted TikTok's move into e-commerce. For example, a Chinese influencer with more than 100 million followers on Douyin announced 3 months ago that he would launch a TikTok channel for cross-border e-commerce. Many Chinese netizens believe that e-commerce program will create new opportunities for small and medium-sized enterprises, while others wonder if the US government might use it as a pretext to impose sanctions on TikTok. Last but not least, on July 27th, China, North Korea, and Russia commemorated the 70th anniversary of the armistice agreement that ended the Korean War. Chinese and Russian delegations met with the country's top leader Kim Jong-un and attended a series of events in Pyongyang. The Chinese delegation was led by Li Hongzhong, vice chairman of the National People's Congress Standing Committee and a member of the Politburo. The Russian delegation was led by Defense Minister Sergei Shoigu. The Korean War is known as the war to resist US aggression and aid Korea in China. It's often regarded as a victory to US aggression in East Asia and a first victory against Western imperialist power in modern Chinese history since 1840. On social media platforms, state media vow to inherit the great spirit that Chinese people and military displayed during the war. For netizens, the war and its anti-US hegemony connotation has become more vivid since China is facing new challenges from hegemonic acts in the new era. That's all for today. Thank you for watching this episode of China Currents. If you have any thoughts and comments about the show, please reach us at email address below. I'm Chris, looking forward to hearing from you, and see you next time.
Hi, I'm Lisa, and this is Threshold in China. Today we are going to share some exciting tech innovations and announcements that happened in China last week. Nicotine, an addictive chemical found in tobacco plants, can cause serious health problems, like we all know. But a group of scientists from the Chinese Academy of Science has discovered that nicotine can have a positive impact on aging in mice. The scientists split 48 healthy young mice into two groups, the experimental group and the control group. Every day, the experimental group drank water infused with a dose of 2 milligrams of nicotine per milliliter, while the control group did not. Over a year, the control group of mice, equivalent to a 50-year-old human, exhibit signs of aging, such as having white fur, slow motions, and poor response time. In contrast, the mice from the experimental group remained in a state of middle age and more energetic. Scientists found that the telomeres in the experimental group's muscle and heart tissue were significantly longer than those in the controlled group. Telomeres are protective caps at the end of chromosomes that shortens as we age. The longer the telomeres, the younger the physiological age. The scientists also observed that the survival rate of the experimental group of mice in their later years was as high as 91%, while the controlled group only had a 54%. This implies that taking nicotine reduced the death rates of mice by nearly 40%. To investigate further, the scientists found that the low dose of nicotine enhanced the activity of a special enzyme, NAMPT, which leads to an increase of NAD+, a molecule that helps cells regenerate energy and repair DNA damage. The scientists examined the brain, heart, liver, muscle, and kidney of the mice when they are 2, 6, and 12 months of age. What they discovered was a gradual decrease in NAMPT activity as the mice grew older. But after administering nicotine through drinking water when they are 6 to 12 months old, the researchers found that nicotine was able to restore NAMPT activity in all tissues. While the findings are extraordinary, it is important to stress that the research was conducted on mice. The same cannot be said for other animals until further research. And the nicotine the mice were getting per dose was 5 to 10 times lower than the nicotine intake from regular smoking. Researchers have warned against the use of nicotine as means of anti-aging because smoking kills, and nicotine addiction can lead to a range of serious health problems. China has begun drilling its second 10,000-meter deep megawell in the hopes of tapping into a vast natural gas reserve. The new well, called Shengdi Chuanke 1, is located in Sichuan province southwest of China. The target depth is 10,520 meters, probably the most difficult drilling project in the world. The complex underground condition and the intricate geological structure add to the challenge. At depths exceeding 10,000 meters, the temperature can soar to 224 degrees Celsius, making metal drilling tools as limp as cooked pasta. And the ultra-high pressure, as the chief engineer Yang Yu said, was akin to diving into the deep sea of 13,800 meters, far exceeding the seawater pressure of the Mariana Trench, which is the deepest ocean in the world. But why is China investing so much on ultra-deep well drilling? Unlike the Middle Eastern countries where oil could be easily extracted from the surface, China's most concentrated oil and gas resources are buried at the average depth of over 6,000 meters. Therefore, ultra-deep exploration and drilling has become a formidable challenge that must be overcome. Ultra-deep is a term reserved for wells that extend beyond 9,000 meters. They are widely regarded as some of the most technically challenging projects in the oil and gas engineering industries. And it's China's second go at ultra-deep drilling, following its first attempt in Tamin Basin, a petroleum-rich region in Xinjiang province, and holds the title of Asia's deepest well. Against the backdrop of geopolitical conflicts, power shortage, and global price fluctuations, energy security has shot up to the top of China's priority list. In response, the country has been putting in enormous efforts to increase domestic energy output by 2025 as a part of its current 5-year plan, while also pursuing clean energy collaboration with other nations. China's natural gas production has been on an upward trend since 2021, and it's the world's 4th largest producer. Moreover, its natural gas supply has now surpassed that of oil. The Shengdi Chuanke 1 well is therefore a vital part of China's energy strategy. If this project succeeds, a new ultra-deep natural gas storage area is expected to be on Earth. Beyond this practical objective, the team also has a more academic goal: to collect geological data from these extreme depths to explore the evolution of the Earth, the origin of life, and climate change. The project's deputy manager, Ding Wei, linked this ambitious 10,000-meter exploration to a major natural project on par with lunar exploration. Recently, videos showing drones extinguishing fires in mid-air went viral on Chinese social media. A rocket streaked across the sky and slammed into the fire building. Those rockets were launched by drones, which were equipped with powder extinguishing agents that could smother fires and prevent them from spreading. These fire drones were made by various Chinese manufacturers, including the well-known DJI and Guofei Aviation. They also have powder sprayers and thermal cameras installed. Drones like these have come with unique advantages. First, the conventional way to put out a fire on a high-rise building would require a fleet of fire trucks with powerful water cannons. But these trucks aren't cheap. According to Firefighter Insider, a basic fire truck or engine with no equipment on it can cost from $250,000 to $6 million US, depending on the type of vehicle. Then there's the equipment too that can cost more than the truck itself. Meanwhile, a typical fire drone costs around $7,000. Of course, a rescue mission would normally require several of these drones, but the price gap is significant. Also, the fire scene is often highly variable and complex. Some might be a high-rise building where fire departments have difficulties in reaching. Drones, on the other hand, are not limited by terrain and light. They have a high mobility, and their visible light camera and the thermal imaging camera can penetrate smoke and some building obstructions, obtaining temperature distribution and achieve precise firefighting. Of course, drones are not going to replace fire trucks entirely, but they may play a more important role in the future. Drones are being rapidly adopted in diverse use, from disaster response to entertaining to hazardous infrastructure inspection. China is the global leader in drone technology, and experts forecast massive growth for the Chinese drone industry in the coming years. From 2017 to 2024, the project compound annual growth rate for the industry is over 40%. For most of us, a lack of sleep can have an effect on our emotional stability. We tend to be more grumpy when sleep deprived. But for those who are battling depression, a lack of sleep might temporarily lift their spirits. Professor Rao Hengyi and his team studied the effect of total sleep deprivation on emotional state and function connectivity networks. The study involves 38 healthy individuals, 30 severely depressed patients, and the controlled group was 60 individuals who were allowed to sleep undisturbed. As expected, most patients' mood worsened after a sleepless night. However, 33% of the depressed patients experienced improved emotions. The researchers used a technique called RSfMRI to map brain activity while the individuals were at rest. By observing the conversations between different regions of the brain, the researchers found that staying awake all night enhanced the connectivity between the two brain regions, the amygdala and the anterior cingulate cortex, ACC, which is often linked to better emotional state in some healthy and depressed individuals. The amygdala is like the alarm system of our body. It processes threats or fears that send signals to other parts of the brain, promoting them to respond accordingly. Like when you are walking alone in a dark street and hearing footsteps behind you. That feeling of fear is processed by your amygdala. And the ACC plays an important role in controlling and managing emotional state or affecting regulation. An explanation offered by the researchers for these individual differences is the duration of rapid eye movement sleep. Sleep isn't a uniform state but occurs in cycles, one of which is REM sleep, where most of our dreaming happens. Researchers have previously shown that severe depression is linked to abnormal REM sleep. However, when it comes to total deprivation, the lack of REM sleep might offer some participants a much-needed break, allowing them to regain control over the amygdala from the bottom top. This surprising interplay between sleep deprivation and emotion regulation could provide a new direction for depression treatment, turning the nightmare of sleeplessness into a potential lifeboat. And that is all for today's Threshold. As always, please let us know if you like this new section on science and technology in China, and we will do more in the future.
China has been around for a few thousand years, and many countries have, but in world history, China is the only country that's been at the top 3 or 4 times. China's also collapsed 3 or 4 times and been catastrophe. But in history, Rome was great once, Egypt was great once, Great Britain was great once. But China's been great 3 or 4 times. You totally collapse, and I don't know why, but it's the only country that after it's been at the bottom for a while, has turned around 3 or 4 times and risen to the top again.
Mr. Rogers raised his question on a long civilizational timescale, stretched across 6 millennia. He mentioned the ancient Egyptian civilization, the Roman Empire, and the Great Britain Empire. So, we'd better start with a brief outline of the world history. By the 4th millennium BC, the Egyptian civilization on the banks of the Nile and the Sumerian civilization in the Mesopotamian Valley had both reached the height of their glory. And around the same time, the Minoan civilization on the island of Crete also flourished. Although these civilizations seem to be developed independently, their life cycles follow a similar pattern. They reach their pinnacles, then collapse and disappear altogether after being invaded and conquered by outsiders. Why did these great civilizations fail to rise again and die out soon after? If an immortal spaceman were looked down on the eastern Mediterranean region from space at this time, he would notice that while most human groups in this region were hunters and gatherers, following food sources, constantly on the move, living a nomadic lifestyle. In his birth view, the ancient Egyptian, Sumerian, and Minoan civilizations, which developed into complex settled societies, were outliers. The invention of solar and lunar calendars in ancient Egypt, the construction of large cities and the sophisticated irrigation system in ancient Sumer, and the building of great palaces and road networks on the ancient island of Crete are typical signs of long-term settlement. But for a long time, these civilizations were isolated and vulnerable, like small islands in the high sea, in danger of being swallowed up by the raging waves, the invasion of the nomadic peoples. As the well-known English historian H.G. Wells put it, the two ways of life specialized in opposite directions. It was inevitable that the nomad folk and the settled folk should clash, that the nomads should seem hard barbarians to the settled peoples, and the settled peoples soft and effeminate and very good plunder to the nomad peoples. Along the fringe of developing civilizations, there must have been a constant raiding and bickering between hardy nomad tribes and the mountain tribes, and the more numerous and less warlike peoples in the towns and the villages. Between 2278 and 2154 BC, Guten hordes invaded Akkadian Empire, bringing an end to an existing civilization without building another in its place. Between 1790 and 1560 BC, the Hittites built an empire in Asia Minor. The ancient Babylonian Empire had lost most of its holdings to the south and the east. The ancient power centers of Sumer were thus largely destroyed and abandoned. Between 1782 and 1630 BC, the wandering Western Semites seized the throne of Egypt and destroyed the Middle Kingdom. Between 1400 and 1200 BC, the palace of Gnosis was destroyed, never rebuilt, and left deserted. And finally, sometimes around 1177 BC, the most murderous warriors, known as Sea Peoples, sailed to destroy the established world and start a new one. With their great migration as well came the downfall of ancient Egypt. The Egyptian inscriptions read in part, "They came from the sea in their warships, and no one could stand against them. Resistance was futile. Their palaces were burned, and their cities destroyed." This is the history of the Eastern Mediterranean area as a whole. It is the triumph of the nomad folks, the devastating conquest upon settled folks, one after another. But one could imagine, what if settled folks won? If, at some critical point, the society of sedentary people not only had a larger population and more land, but had also become well-organized, well-equipped, educated, and trained, and thus strong enough not only to defend their homes, but also to fight back against the nomads and take their base camps, the main historical narrative would have been very different. Now, if our immortal spaceman were look down on the east end of the Eurasia continent, he would see that in the same historical period, contrary to what happened in the Eastern Mediterranean area, the story in China is the success of the settled folks who assimilate and integrated with the nomad folks, and followed by Sicily's expansion of the sedentary civilization. We see that the Middle East and East Asia followed two distinct evolutionary paths. In the Middle East, the nomad folks conquered the entire settled folks society, and then rebuilt a new society while retaining the nomad tradition on the ruins of the original civilization. In East Asia, through constant resistance and counter-conquest, the settled folks eventually extended the entire settled society to a larger area. And although it would also be ruled by powerful nomadic folks from time to time, the new society still retained the tradition of sedentary civilization in essence. Mr. Rogers also asked why the Roman Empire and the British Empire became number one for a single period of history and then never recovered after their decline. In fact, the Arab Empire in the 7th to 10th century, the Mongol Empire in the 13th to 14th century, and the Ottoman Empire in the 16th to 19th century were all the same. They never resurrected after their collapse. Well, the fundamental reason is this. These empires were all nomadic-dominated empires. Their rulers were either horse-riding nomads, or camel-riding nomads, or sheep-riding nomads. And although the nomadic rulers also learned many cultural establishments and refined art from the conquered, and gradually became part of the civilization. They all follow the same pattern of rise and fall. It begins with the unity upon kindred nomad tribes, then reaching their heyday in the war of conquest and settle down on the conquered land. Then, at the point in time, quickly fall apart after the failure of the fresh overseas adventures, or the failure of internal ethnic assimilation and cultural integration, or both. Take the Roman Empire as an example. The barbarian tribes that destroyed the Eastern Mediterranean civilizations were in fact the very creators of the ancient Greco-Roman civilization. Before the establishment of Alexander the Great's empire, the Celtic barbarians from Gaul entered Rome. 100 years later, Rome unified the Italian peninsula, and 200 years later, the Mediterranean Sea became a Roman lake. Under such circumstances, the new civilization not only took over all the settled lands of the old civilization, but also constituted a larger and more complex structure of settled society, in which it was no longer possible to revive the old civilizations of ancient Babylon, ancient Persia, and ancient Greece. But as the Roman Empire ran out of foreign settled societies to conquer, and its internal corruption grew, when its northern borders were invaded by the more powerful and ferocious Germanic barbarians, its downfall was inevitable. The rise and fall of the British Empire followed the same pattern. The seafaring pirate people from British islands, having mastered advanced navigation and weaponry, conquered many settled societies on different continents and built a vast empire on which the sun never sets. However, when there was no new settled society to conquer, and more powerful rivals arose, it could not escape the same fate as other nomadic-dominated empires. Now, let's turn to China. One conclusion among the Western scholars is that Chinese civilization doesn't seem to have a beginning. As Dr. Henry Kissinger put it in his book, China stretches into the historical consciousness as the established state requiring only restoration, not creation. Of course, the Chinese civilization has its beginning, but it is not a beginning with some kind of a victorious conquest which is more familiar with nomad folk. It is a decisive victory of settled folk who achieved solid unity of kindred villages and towns. From Xuanyuan, the Yellow Emperor, to Da Yu, the king of Xia, in the 3rd millennium BC, all the legendary founding rulers of China were re-establishing, not creating, an empire of settled society. Each of these founding rulers made a unique contribution to the progress of settlement, not only in terms of cultural integration and ethnic assimilation, but also in terms of the periodical expansion of territory and population. Da Yu becoming the ruler of the Xia dynasty was a landmark event in history. In those ancient times, when great floods were common, people in other parts of the world had only two choices: to be swallowed up by flood or to flee far away from it. But the Chinese people, and only Chinese people, saw a third option: to rely on human power to level the land and divert the water. A chosen king with a high moral standard managed to unite all local laws, gather massive human and material resources in his kingdom to complete this huge engineering project of flood control. And from then on, the settlement of the Chinese people were permanently fixed in the form of 9 states, which have not changed for 4,000 years since then. Through large-scale water management projects, early Chinese sedentary societies greatly expanded their boundaries and effectively reached their critical point of survival from destruction by the surrounding nomadic societies. Ancient Chinese texts gave different names to the nomad folk in the directions of south, north, east, and west, showing that by this time, China's sedentary agricultural society had already expanded into an almost circular territory centered in the middle and lower plain of the Yellow River, squeezing all the nomadic tribes into the remote surrounding area. This is why China came to be known as the Central Kingdom, although its size was sometimes larger and sometimes smaller. Mr. Rogers realized that China has fallen many times in history. There have been many periods of civil war, interregnum, and chaos in Chinese history. These periods he refers to are no other than the similar dark ages when China, as an agricultural society of settled folk, was overtaken by nomad folk. Around the same time as when the Germanic barbarians invaded the Roman Empire, quite a few wandering tribes living in northern China, known collectively as the Five Hus, finally became strong enough to break through the defense boundaries of northern China. However, unlike the Roman Empire, which completely collapsed under the attack and could not be rebuilt, the Five Hus entered China and embraced Chinese culture based on sedentary civilization and became part of the new Central Kingdom. After a century of great integration, the great empires of the Sui and the Tang dynasties, as a reconstruction of Qing and Han dynasties, encompassed more people, covered larger territories, and reached higher culture peaks. Then, history repeated itself. In the 13th century, the Mongol Empire, the greatest steppe empire in human history, rose almost overnight, sweeping over much of the known world, including all of China. But unlike the rest of the world, the Mongol dynasty that was established in the land of the Central Kingdom, once again out of their own tradition. It was not a nomadic Mongol empire anymore, but to a great extent a copy of the Qing and Han sedentary kingdoms. In the case of China, although the rulers were replaced by the foreigners, its own cultural sphere actually expanded into the ruler's homeland. Furthermore, because of the ever-elevating critical point of survival after each collapse, as if by law of nature, the Chinese state has increased its capacity to rebuild itself. The great unification of Ming and Qing dynasties from the 15th to the 19th century was a repetition of history, encompassing more peoples, covering a larger territory, and reaching a higher culture peak. At this point, I believe I have answered Ms. Rogers' question in a very comprehensive way. So, knowing all of this, how should we understand the world as it is today? First, we need to recognize that the great rejuvenation of Chinese nation today is still with its uniqueness and can't be compared to or predicted by the rise and fall of other empires in history. Comparing China to Germany and Japan in recent history, or see China as an emerging superpower that threatens existing world order, are misleading, if not incorrect. The historical process of China, from its decline to its rejuvenation since the late days of the Qing dynasty, can still be seen as a repetition of history. That is, the rejuvenation of its own tradition and the gradual creation of a new civilization by absorbing elements from different civilizations. This is the unique characteristics of Chinese civilization and the fundamental reason why it became the most continuous and successful settled civilization in the world. On a global scale, since the end of the 19th century, with stronger sovereignty of the nation-states, tighter border controls, and increasing urbanization, the phenomenon of great migration of ethnic groups have gradually disappeared. Well, the population of settled societies has increased dramatically. Compared to most times of the human history, we can say that the world today is a globally settled world. There are no longer an entire society of horse riding or camel riding or boat riding people. If we take an outline of world history and regard the European colonial and imperialist wars of conquered in the 17th to the 19th centuries as the last great victory of nomad folk over settled folk in the recent 6 millennia, then the flourishing of sedentary societies throughout the world since the 20th century, especially since the end of the Second World War, means that sedentary civilization has finally dominated the globe, and that we have reached some kind of the end of history. Now we are entering a new era, the era of global sedentarization, in which all countries in the world are facing new challenges. Why are there more and more internal conflicts in Western countries? Why has China continuously proposed global initiatives, BRI, building a community with a shared future of mankind, GSI, GDI, and GCI? The answers lie in the historical perspective described above.
And this was the first episode of China Now, a show that opens a window to the present and the future of China. I hope you enjoyed it. See you next time.
Millions of people have fled conflicts, persecution, discrimination, violence, and all the reasons that are often added to the impact of climate change. According to the latest report published by UNHCR, the number of internally displaced persons and refugees in the world reached a record number of around 110 million people, and almost half of the total are children. 3.9 million, representing more than a third of displaced children, live in sub-Saharan Africa, 2.6 million, representing a quarter in Europe and Central Asia, and 1.4 million in the Middle East and North Africa. The conflict in Ukraine, the stampede of refugees from Afghanistan, and the fighting in Sudan raised those tolls unstoppably.
UNHCR latest Global Trends report finds that 2022 ended with a staggering number of refugees and displaced people in the world, reaching 108.4 million. In Europe, the conflict in Ukraine caused this number to increase considerably compared to previous ones, together with other attacks, such as for example that of Sudan. These have made the total figure rise to 110 million people affected. Undoubtedly, the conflict in Ukraine was a before and after in this number of refugees and displaced people during 2022. According to the UNHCR report, the European country went from having 37,300 displaced people and refugees at the end of 2021 to 5.7 million at the end of 2022. This exodus is the fastest growing since the World War II. The constant bombing of the population of Donbass by Ukraine and the Russian response to stop this aggression triggered the most serious refugee crisis in Europe. Poland has played an important role in the conflict. After Russia, Poland has received more Ukrainians than other nations, functioning as a buffer zone between the fighting and the rest of Europe, while the Polish government militarily assessed Kiev as part of NATO's support strategy.
According to a report referred to by the United Nations High Commissioner for Refugees, the conflict in Ukraine has been the main factor of forced displacement in the recent war. The number of refugees from the country to Eastern Europe increased from 27,300 at the end of 2021 to 5.7 million at the end of 2022. This is the largest number of refugees on the move since World War II.
I have hardly ever seen such a massive and particularly rapid departure of people. The response is good. Most of those who leave, you already know for sure, are women and children, because men are recruited by the army. It is a group that has many vulnerabilities, especially a sudden life situation.
The conflicts in Sudan have so far added more than 1.6 million forcibly displaced people to the list. 1.2 million, almost 250,000 families, have sought shelter from fighting in Khartoum, the capital, in other regions of the country, while another 380,000 people have crossed the border into neighboring countries such as Egypt, Chad, and the Central African Republic.
There are certainly civilians for whom we are in the process of welcoming them and taking all the necessary measures to ensure that they are properly accommodated. Today we have crossed the barrier of 500,000 refugees from Sudan from the beginning of the conflict on April 15th. 500,000 new refugees in Africa, which is already the continent that has so many refugees and displaced. This is painful.
This is the fastest exodus since the Second World War. The response of the European Union was unanimous. Protection will be given to all those Ukrainian refugees. Thus, in a few days, the Temporary Protection Directive was launched, which allowed to guarantee temporary protection collectively, without the long waits that characterize asylum procedures, and give access to a set of rights, including the right to work, education and health. However, it has not been the same for the rest of the refugees in the world.
We have already received in Europe almost 1 million refugees for a hurricane. We are going to see millions more, and that is really why we need more solidarity and why we need adequate legislation to provide protection to people, to give them rights. And of course, we are also going to need additional funds.
We are not going to accept a single one. If it is illegal, if you do not comply with the legal procedure to obtain refugee status, to be a refugee according to international law, you must request asylum in the first country you set foot in. It seems that Syria is neighbor of Poland. My experience has been very difficult. In Spain, and I can say a bad experience, the issue of the papers. You cannot leave the country, you are trapped in the country. They don't give you help easily, you have to ask and ask and ask. You feel very bad.
More than a year after the start of the conflict, UNHCR counts 18 million departures from Ukraine, but also 10 million returns. In total, in this first year, more than 8 million Ukrainian refugees have been registered in Europe, 4.8 of whom have obtained temporary protection.
In the first day of the military operation, about 10,000 people visit from Poland to Ukraine every day. Now there are 20,000 and sometimes 22,000 and 23,000.
At the beginning of the conflict between Ukraine and Russia, Poland made public its condemnation of Russia's special military operation. Poland's position in the conflict was predictable due to the previous history of this country, especially the legacy of territorial losses, initially with Germany and then the subsequent Soviet occupation. This coupled with expansion of NATO interest within Eastern Europe, with which this nation has aligned, and roles have developed a fairly potent anti-Russian or Russophobia sentiment. So far, Russia remains the country that has received the most refugees in the context of the conflict, i.e. 2.8 million, followed by Poland with 1.5 million, Germany with 1 million, the Czech Republic with 486,000, Italy with 169,000, Spain with 161,000, and the United Kingdom with 858,000. Although the reception was unanimous, temporary protection is still a precarious formula, and the old discussion on how to share responsibility between member states are reborn.
My family and I are desperately looking for a house. It is very hard. We move from one apartment to another without being able to find a long-term home.
Where we can stay a long time.
We have problems with housing and money. No one in my family works because my mother does speak German yet. She is learning the language, but how do we cope in this meantime?
The European Union has granted a multitude of aid for refugees, but they are not enough. From the Polish government, we believe that it will be important to create a fund to manage these European subsidies and thus better cover the needs of the people in reception. There are many people who have already found employed. For example, here in Poland there is much that are still looking for it, and the situation is better for many. But there are still many needs.
Since the beginning of 2023, Poland has taken a more active role in the conflict, currently having the sixth largest army in Europe, totaling 110,000 troops. The presence of NATO in the country and its good relations with the United States and South Korea have allowed Poland to import and develop military equipment with high technological capabilities, so much so that in January 2023, Poland and Lithuania announced the sending of Leopard tanks and urged the other powers to do the same. Although, under the emergency, Ukrainian refugees are the ones welcome. The rest of the refugees coming from other countries need to cross borders irregularly to access the right to international protection. Once in Europe, they suffer long waits to enter the reception systems, which are often already saturated. Long procedures that eventually end in denials and the threat of deportation in most cases.
There is heating here and we have enough food. This camp is alright.
I have already hired 2 Ukrainian refugees women here, another 3 collaborate voluntarily, and they have already expressed their interest in working with US. As soon as they clarify their situation, we will see what we can do. Other hotels in the Agria group are also interested in hiring refugees for Ukraine. It's a way to help in the long term, and not just for a month or 2. Honestly, in Spain, it's not safer than in Ukraine. We have even thought about returning to Ukraine because we were hoping for help, but in the end, we find ourselves on the street in a foreign country. Without money, without food, without housing, it's very dangerous. We have 2 small children. In general, it's very stressful.
The EU's swift and largely effective response to the mass displacement of Ukrainians contrasted sharply with the abusive treatment of migrants and asylum seekers from other regions of the world and many of the EU's other external borders. In an unprecedented move, the European Commission invoked the Temporary Protection Directive for Ukrainian asylum seekers, demonstrating that when there is political will, the EU can confront and guarantee human rights and protection migrants fleeing persecution, war, and violence.
In 2022, a record number of more than 43 million displaced children alarmed the UN Children's Fund UNICEF. after doubling in the last decade. The conflict between Russia and Ukraine has triggered one of the fastest large-scale displacement of children since the Second World War. The situation in the region has forced more than 2 million Ukrainian minors to flee the country and displaced more than 1 million within Ukraine. UNICEF warns that the growing number of displaced people highlights the world's inability to address the causes of displacement and thus provide solutions for children on the move. It also points out that internally displaced and refugee children are the most vulnerable population in host states. However, many are denied access to education, healthcare, and are not routinely vaccinated and cannot access social protection.
UNICEF estimates that the number of children forcibly displaced from their homes doubled in the last decade. By the end of 2022, a record 43.3 million children were living in forced displacement, many throughout their childhood. The conflict in Ukraine has forced more than 2 million Ukrainian children to flee the country and displaced more than 1 million inside Ukraine. Data indicate that of 43.3 million children who were forced to flee their homes by the end of 2022, nearly 60% or 25.8 million had been internally displaced by conflict and violence left in the world. To this is added the displacement of minors due to extreme weather events, such as floods in Pakistan and drought in the Horn of Africa, which caused an additional 12 million children to be displaced throughout 2022.
Our home has been destroyed, our belongings disappeared in the Great Flood. Our children wait at the bank without food and without a house.
According to experts of all IDPs and refugees, children are often among the most vulnerable. Many are denied access to education or health care, are not routinely vaccinated, and cannot access social protection.
Not all children will need a therapeutic treatment to have a structured a daily routine. The school, some activities in a club, and family are a great help. I think that for many children the most important thing is to be established a normal daily life. Some of these children will show symptoms over time and a smaller number will need professional help.
Necesitará ayuda profesional.
We work with teachers. We teach them how to create an environment in the classroom, in a school, so that children feel safe, so that this trauma they have lived does not leave such heavy traces for the future, so they can cope. And we say that the trauma is not what happened, but what we think afterward, and we help teachers build a strategy that will help them help themselves first, and then also help children cope with this condition.
According to data provided by UNHCR, over the past year, more than 9.5 million Ukrainians have arrived in Poland. Nearly 8 million have returned home, mainly women and children. For its part, the Polish press says that about 2/3 of those who stayed have found work, and that initiatives such as Ukrainian schools for refugee children have been launched. These schools follow the Ukrainian curriculum for children whose families wish to return to Ukraine as soon as they can. However, NGOs that work in the country indicate that the demand for these schools is much greater than the places available.
My plans are to go to Polish high school or somewhere further afield because I am learning English. If I succeed, maybe we'll go to England. That's also a possibility. But now we're in Poland for a year.
Another significant number of children are taking online courses from Ukrainian schools, and several of them have moved to other countries or even returned to Ukraine. In September 2022, only 185,000 Ukrainian refugees were enrolled in Polish schools. The number increased to 200,000 over the course of the school year.
Children have to learn in other school or in the Ukrainian school online or go to Polish school. There is simply not enough space in a Polish school. I can prepare for college the same way I did it a month ago. Now it's hard to focus on classes.
However, UNICEF warns that more than half of Ukrainian refugee children in Poland are not enrolled in the national school system, and only a third of adolescents are enrolled in the secondary school.
It's very important to keep in touch with teachers and classmates because we need them, so we also know how each one of us is doing, and everyone finds out I'm okay.
As the total number of displaced and refugee children reaches a record high, access to essential services such as healthcare, education, and protection is limited.
All the other children can study, but these children go there every day and then coming back, they don't give them books or listen. Why? Well, because we don't have documents. They like the school and cry over it. They can do study and learn. They love it. And do you know what the future of the person who doesn't not study or learn will be? His life will be worthless.
UNICEF says the increase in displaced children is a reflection of the conflicts, crises, and climate disasters that occur constantly around the world. But it also highlights the insufficient response of many governments to ensure that refugee and internally displaced children have access to education and health.
It is clear that in the world, the number of children displaced from their homes is increasing. UNICEF notes that this increase also highlights the insufficient response of many governments to ensure that all refugee and internally displaced children can continue their education, stay healthy, and develop their full potential. In this regard, the agency called on governments to provide safe and legal pathways for children to move, seek asylum, and be reunited with their families, as well as ensuring that no child is detained because of their immigration status or returned without safeguards, and strengthen national education, health, and social protection systems to include displaced children among other measures. Thus we come to an end of our program. We invite you to stay in tune with TeleSUR, follow us on our social networks, and we invite you next week to a new edition of Between Borders.
Para mantenerme saludable, yo corro.
To keep myself healthy, I study.
Για να διατηρηθώ υγιής, τρέφομαι σωστά.
Para mantenerme saludable, yo bailo.
Para mantenerme saludable, yo purifico mi espíritu a través del cuerpo. ¿Y tú?
Guide your body. Tuesdays, only on TeleSUR.
Una travesía para descubrirnos. Buscamos conexiones perdidas.
No nos queda otra que luchar, porque no tenemos nada que perder.
Realmente es por todos.
Recorremos el mundo con Reportajes TeleSUR.
Saturdays. Only on TeleSUR. Who's moving the chessmen? What interests and motivate the actors behind each event? The board is deployed there. Critical Move investigates every event from Monday to Friday. Only on TeleSUR.
At least 13 Haitian nationals died in the province of Valverde in the Dominican Republic, with 2 minors among the fatalities confirmed. According to UNICEF reports, the children living in South Asia are exposed to temperatures above 35 degrees Celsius for long hours. And Niger remains under threat of military intervention following a warning from the Directive of the Economic Community of West African States. From the headquarters of TeleSUR English in Havana, Cuba, this is From the South. I'm your anchor, Gladys Quesada, and these are the news. On early Monday morning, Dominican Republic's authorities report the death of 13 Haitian asylum seekers in Valverde province, with 2 minors among the fatalities. According to preliminary reports, there are 2 survivors who have been transferred to a regional hospital center. The local prosecutor's office has assumed the investigation, from which it has only turned out that the Haitian citizens could have been illegal immigrants. The Dominican government has established strict immigration controls against the neighboring nation, which forces hundreds of Haitians who maintain family, commercial, and even health ties with the Dominican Republic choose increasingly insecure roads for crossing the border. On Sunday, the Apostolic Nunciature of El Salvador announced that the martyrs of the Civil War who were assassinated by the military will be canonized. The Archbishop of San Salvador, Monsignor José Luis Escobar, announced in a speech during the closing Mass of the celebrations in honor of the Divine Child, Savior of the world, one of the most important in the country, that the process of canonization of the martyrs of the armed conflict has begun. Among them is the Jesuit priest Ignacio Ellacuria, murdered in the facilities of the Central American University of El Salvador, along with other priests and collaborators in November of 1989. Archbishop Escobar took advantage of the occasion to call on the government to free the innocent people imprisoned during the regime of exception. Let's go to Bolivia. There, on the occasion of the commemoration of the 198th anniversary of that nation's independence, President Luis Arce Catacora called for national unity and reaffirmed his commitment to the struggle for a country with social justice. National and regional authorities participated in the celebration of the independence of the Latin American nation, and the main event took place in the Legislative Assembly, where authorities remembered the independence struggle fought in the nation during 16 years. In this context, the President Arce reaffirmed the national will to fight for a social just homeland and referred to some of the achievements that the nation has attained, among them the recovery of the national economy after the COVID-19 pandemic. Bolivia achieved independence from the Spanish Empire on August 6, 1825, and was refounded as a plurinational state with a new constitution in 2009.
I want to begin this message
by reaffirming with great patriotic conviction our unwavering determination, commitment, and perseverance to never stop fighting for a homeland with social justice. 198 years ago, Bolivia burst into the concert of free, sovereign, and independent nations, an act preceded by an arduous and bloody war that for 16 years kept the colonial power in Peru in check, which was finally sealed by the extraordinary triumphs of the United Liberating Army, the famous fields of Junín and Ayacucho. Neither with Lima nor with Buenos Aires, High Peru decided to become a new independent country on that luminous day of August the 6th, 1825.
And the Vice President of the plurinational state of Bolivia, David Choquehuanca, also recalled the native peoples who defended the territory after 3 centuries of extermination and plundering.
We remember the 198 years of the War of Independence, fought for 16 years where we defeated the invaders, after 3 centuries of extermination and plundering of resources. It is a perfect moment to remember the struggle of thousands of anonymous native brothers and sisters who defended their territories in order not to be wiped off the map and not to be eliminated from the planet.
And after 3 days of debate, the Amazon dialogues held in the Brazilian city of Belém ended on Sunday. In the event, representatives of various sectors of society discussed the future of the Amazon region. Since last Friday, representatives of social movements, academia, research centers, as well as Brazilian government agencies and other Amazonian countries analyzed the challenges facing the largest rainforest in the planet. The protection of the native people, the climate crisis and health, as well as sovereignty, food security, and the bioeconomy were the main topics were analyzed. It is expected that at the close of the event, they will draft a document containing proposals to protect and address the problems faced by the Amazon region and its inhabitants. The final draft of the Amazon dialogues will be sent to the leaders of the countries of the Amazon Cooperation Treaty Organization, who will meet next Monday and Tuesday, also in the capital of the state of Pará, in the so-called Amazon Summit. And a new incident of violence was recorded in the United States. At least 3 people dead and 2 more injured in Washington, D.C. Approximately around 8 p.m. local time, detonations were heard, alerting the security forces, who upon arriving at the site found 5 people shot and wounded. The Washington, D.C. Metropolitan Police reported that those killed are 2 men and a woman. Meanwhile, 2 other males were taken to an assistance center for medical attention. Authorities stated that they have begun investigations to determine who was responsible for the killings.
We are here again tonight on the scene of another senseless act of violence. At approximately 8 o'clock p.m. tonight, our officers responded to the sounds of gunshot here in the 1600 block of Good Hope Road Southeast. When the officers arrived, they found 5 individuals who were injured by gunfire. 4 of those individuals were males, 1 is a female. 3 were pronounced on the scene, and 2 were transported to local area hospitals. What I have to say tonight is this is very disturbing. Very, very disturbing. And we're asking you, the community, to please provide us with any information that you may have with regards to this incident on tonight.
Let's take a short break. But remember, you can join us on TikTok at TeleSUR English, where you will find the news in different formats, news updates and more. Other stories coming up. Stay with us.
Una travesía para descubrirnos. Buscamos conexiones perdidas.
No nos queda otra que luchar, porque no tenemos nada que perder.
Realmente es por todos.
Recorremos el mundo con Reportajes TeleSUR.
Saturdays. Only on TeleSUR.
El mundo se mueve constantemente y todos los días se generan nuevos sucesos. Se mueve la geopolítica mundial. Nos preguntamos qué hay detrás de cada acontecimiento, cuáles son las consecuencias y cómo nos afectan. Ante estas preguntas, buscaremos poner el punto en la I.
Welcome back. According to a UNICEF report, children living in South Asia are exposed to temperatures above 35 degrees Celsius for long hours. The United Nations Children's Agency, children in countries such as Afghanistan, India, Sri Lanka, and Pakistan, among others, are exposed to scorching heat. They are the most affected in the world by this phenomenon, not only in intensity, but also in time, as they face more than 4 heat waves every year. The agency recalled that Kakobabad, a Pakistani city, recorded the highest temperature on the planet when it reached 51 degrees Celsius. They explained that children's anatomies cannot adapt quickly to changes in temperature. The government of China created a new special fund to help those affected by rains in the country's northern region. The Central Administration, the Ministry of Finance, and the Emergency Management of China reported that $50 million were allocated to rescue works, as well as for the recovery of affected buildings and constructions. Authorities detailed that local governments will be able to make use of these funds to face emergencies and assist the families affected by the typhoon Doksuri.
Upon receiving the goods allocation instruction from the Ministry of Emergency Management, the National Food and Strategic Reserves Administration immediately issued the order to relieve supply storage warehouses under the central government, who finished the loading of the supplies onto trucks within half an hour and shipped them out of Tianjin. When these national relief materials goods reached Tianjin, grassroots officials and volunteers immediately got organized and took action swiftly to deliver them to the disaster-affected people right away.
And in China, at least 23 people were injured and thousands of buildings collapsed after a shallow 5.4 magnitude earthquake that struck eastern China on Sunday. According to the U.S. Geological Survey, the USGS, the quake struck at 2:33 a.m. local time, 26 kilometers south of the city of Jiazhou in Shandong province at a depth of 10 kilometers. The quake was felt as far away as Beijing and Tianjin, as well as in Shanghai, about 800 kilometers from the epicenter. Videos on social media showed shaking light fixtures, trembling ground, and people evacuating their buildings, with one clip showing people walking past bricks scattered on the ground. USGS pager system, which provides preliminary assessments on the impact of the earthquakes, issued a red alert estimating extensive damage and some casualties were probable based on the previous quake data. Now we move on to other topics. In Russia, at least one was injured and more than 20 people or 1,000 people lost their gas supply after the Ukrainian attack on a school and a bridge in northern Crimea. The educational institution was empty and the attack did not affect the structure of the bridge. However, the traffic in the area has been interrupted. The governor, Vladimir Saldo, denounced that the Ukrainian forces resort to state terrorism by indecently attacking civilian infrastructure and that the main intention of the regime was to attack the village school. He also pointed out that the bridge does not have much military relevance. On Sunday, Japan marked the 78th anniversary of the atomic bombing of Hiroshima by the U.S., which killed almost 140,000 people. The highlight of the event was the traditional peace declaration delivered at the ceremony in the Peace Memorial Park by Hiroshima Mayor Kazumi Matsui. On the occasion of the Group of 7 Leaders' historic visit to Japan's park and its atomic bomb museum, Matsui urged policymakers to abandon the notion that the nuclear weapons deter war. The gruesome nuclear legacy took center stage at the last G7 summit of major economies in May in Japan. A moment of silence was observed at 8:15 a.m. local time, the exact moment when the uranium bomb was dropped by the U.S. bomber Enola Gay and detonated over the city on August 6, 1945, killing an estimated 140,000 people by the end of the year.
Given the reality that there are some who will use nuclear threats, leaders around the world need to face up to the fact that the theory of nuclear deterrence has failed and urgently begin to take concrete steps to move us away from the dangerous present towards our ideal world. The horrors of Hiroshima and Nagasaki caused by nuclear weapons must never be repeated. Japan, as the only country to have suffered nuclear war, will continue to make tireless efforts to realize a world without nuclear weapons, while adhering to the 3 non-nuclear principles.
And at least 30 asylum seekers are missing following 2 shipwrecks off the Italian island of Lampedusa. On Sunday, the International Organization for Migration, the IOM, said survivors had reported that around 28 people were lost at sea on one boat, while 3 were said to be missing from the second following stormy weather on Saturday. Both flimsy iron boats are believed to have set off from Sfax in Tunisia on Thursday. On Sunday, rescue teams were also preparing to pull about 20 migrants to safety after they were trapped on a rocky part of Lampedusa's coastline. The Central Mediterranean crossing from North Africa to Europe is the world's deadliest. Over 1,800 people have died attempting it so far this year, according to officials, almost 900 more than last year. TeleSUR English launches its own videos on demand site for you to go and revisit our interviews, the top stories, the special broadcastings, and more. Just go to the top left corner in our website homepage and click on the video option to access our VOD platform. And now we will have a short break. Stay with us.
TeleSUR is the voice that speaks up in defense of the people of Latin America and the world. For me, it is a media that offers different perspectives. It invites us to reflect and question the hegemonic narratives. From the fight against poverty and social exclusion to the defense of human rights and social justice. TeleSUR is more than just a television channel. It's a platform that celebrates our people's diversity. It inspires us to be more informed, more aware, and committed to the construction of a better world. Hello, welcome to From the South.
Welcome back to From the South. Niger remains under threat of military intervention on Monday following a warning from the Directive of the Economic Community of West African States. After the expiration of the deadline given to the National Safeguards Council of the Economic Community of West African States, ECOWAS, the Council closed the airspace, mobilized the troops to the borders of the host countries, and warned of a joint response. However, the military intervention agreed to on Friday in the Nigerian capital by the Western Bloc High Command did not take place. ECOWAS reported on Monday that it is preparing a statement with the next steps and does not rule out a new visit to Niamey. And we stay in Niger, where about 30,000 coup supporters rallied on Sunday afternoon at the General Seyni Count Shea Stadium, the biggest stadium in Niamey and in all Niger. With only a few hours to go before the end of the ultimatum given to the junta of Niger by the Economic Community of West African States, ECOWAS, the stadium was filled in response to the call by several civil society organizations. Nearly 30,000 people went to support the junta in a good atmosphere, and many Nigerian flags were waving in the stands. Several members of the Council National pour la Sauvegarde de la Patrie, the CNSP, were present and were cheered for a long time. In Senegal, deputies in the parliament have passed a vote which will effectively restore the right of Turkey opposition figures to run in the country's presidential election due in February. The vote clears any person who has been convicted by either pardons or amnesties them to run for office. The decision allows opposition heavyweights Khalifa, Sall and Karim Wade to stand. Interior Minister Antoine Felix Abdoulaye Diom explained that many of the changes in the law resulted from the national dialogue. Many observers hope Saturday's parliamentary vote will help ease the tension being experienced in the country in recent months, as opposition figures have frequently complained of moves against them ahead of the presidential vote next year.
Basically, the idea was really to be able to grant amnesty to candidates such as Khalifa Sall and so many others for acts of which they have been accused. And so we salute the Republican dynamic that was felt in the room. The Bino parliamentarians, the Wallo parliamentarians, and the Taxawo parliamentarians have honored the commitments they made during this dialogue, which was initiated by the President of the Republic.
At least 28 people were killed on Sunday when an express train derailed in southern Pakistan, the railway minister said, with an emergency declared at local hospitals struggling to deal with dozens of injured. Railway Minister Khawaja Azad Rafiq told reporters that this is quite a big accident and that at least 1,000 passengers were aboard the Hazara Express when it derailed on a section of the tracks where no faults had been reported. He also said that there could be two reasons, a mechanical failure or that the failure was created, which means it could be sabotage, but that they will investigate. The derailment happened near Sahara railway station close to Nabuwash city in the southern Sindh province. The railway minister announced that an emergency had been declared at local hospitals as doctors struggled to treat the injured. There were chaotic scenes at the Nabuwash Trauma Center as ambulances and private cars ferried the injured for treatment. And we have come to the end of this news brief. But remember, you can find this and many other stories on our website at telesurenglish.net. And also, if you feel so inclined, please join us on social media for all the latest news. We are on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, Telegram, and TikTok. For TeleSUR English, I'm your anchor, Gladys Quesada. Thank you for watching.
We share your feelings, exalt your accomplishments, and show your reality. Our approach is global and keeps us in tune with the peoples. Caribbean countries also get our signal. With enthusiasm, we will continue to broadcast for them. Because we are TeleSUR. the news broadcaster from South America and the Caribbean.
Un canto por la América Unida. Mira, que lo escuchan allá arriba. ¡Vamos! Somos la tierra, somos la arcilla, la esperanza que brota y germina. 500 años nos han pisoteado, aquí seguimos, de aquí no nos vamos. América, 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 lindísimo continente se levanta, unido que no calla. América, América, lindísimo continente se levanta, unido que no calla. Pueblo latino, vamos para adelante, tumbando fronteras, somos gigantes, nadie se rinde, vamos para arriba, esa tierra es tuya y también es mía. Pueblo mestizo, guerrero y solidario, aquí nadie es extraño, aquí somos hermanos. Todos los países digan presente, Venezuela y Cuba presente, Nicaragua, Honduras presente, el Caribe entero. América, se levanta, pueblo unido que no calla, no se detiene. América, América, se levanta, pueblo unido que no calla.
Soy Tupacatari, soy hueca y puro, 5 siglos resistiendo el atropello y el abuso. El Avia Yala reflorece junto al alba, sin un solo continente porque rayos nos separa. Con Sucre y Bolívar seguimos pa'lante, pa' encima latino, no hay visa que nos pare.
Desde la Patagonia hasta el Río Bravo, los latinos levantamos la mano. América, América, lindísimo continente se levanta, unido que no calla. América, lindísimo continente se levanta, unido que no calla. México y Bolivia, Puerto Rico libre. Todo el continente latino.
Hola, ¿qué tal? Sean todos muy bienvenidos a Vidas. Hay lugares donde el arte se unifica con el orgullo de los pueblos. Y esos lugares están llenos de colores, alegría, pasión, tradiciones, arraigo, valor y entrega.
Real Life. Fridays. Only on TeleSUR. Every year, thousands of people leave their homeland to reach new horizons. A reality of those people who struggle for their freedom. Know the diverse causes of those who live between borders. Thursdays, only on TeleSUR.